Hi, this is Morley, and this is the M-Wire. Well, folks, the talks that Russia had with NATO yesterday at NATO headquarters in Brussels, as expected, were less than fruitful. These sides are basically no closer to an agreement than they were before these talks, as I predicted, because both sides are completely obstinate towards one another as to what the other wants. NATO contends that basically they can admit whoever they like and they don't need any other country's permission or blessing or consent, if you will, to do so. Russia, on the other hand, is of a very different mindset, and they believe that any eastern expansion of NATO will threaten their security. So these meetings went on for approximately 4 hours yesterday, a little longer than anticipated, but nonetheless, both sides are no closer to understanding one another and coming to an agreement with one another than they were before these meetings. So the big question is, what happens now? Well, behind the scenes, while these meetings were occurring, Russia has been doing live fire exercises near the Ukrainian border, coming very shy of Ukraine itself, if the truth be known, as well as the United States has sent a nuclear submarine towards Russian waters. So the unspoken truth about all of this, if anything, is that these meetings have essentially exacerbated the tensions between these countries of NATO, the United States, and Russia. Both sides seem to be heavily on guard now that these talks haven't gone anywhere because everyone is trying to figure out what is Mr. Putin's next move. Now, I've been thinking, folks, and it's entirely possible that these 100,000 plus troops that Vladimir Putin has on the Ukrainian border could very well just be a decoy. That echoes of a World War II style invasion, if you will, but that's not necessarily what Mr. Putin could be up to. If you get down to the brass tacks of Russia's military, Russia has more than enough missiles, if they wanted to destroy the capital city of Kiev in Ukraine without sending a single man over the border. Now, I'm not saying that that is his game, but it's possible. It's entirely possible. Russia's military is absolutely no slouch on the international stage when it comes to countries' militaries, and that could very well be a probability in the future. Here is basically a synopsis as to how these meetings went, and this is from the Russian perspective, folks. This article that I'm about to give you is from TASS, which is the official Russian news agency. So this is their take on how these talks went yesterday. Kremlin states that disagreements have been detected on principal issues during the Russia-US talks in Geneva and Russia-NATO talks in Brussels, and is a bad thing, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Thursday. The talks were initiated in order to obtain specific answers to specific questions, and disagreements have been detected on the principal issues. It is a bad thing. It could be considered a low point of the last 2 rounds of talks, he said. Peskov noted that during both rounds there were some positive nuances, positive elements that could be considered high points, but they were not the main goal of these consultations. They could not act as reasons for emergency meetings. When asked whether or not the Kremlin sees a point in further talk with the U.S. on security, Peskov said, Russia has never lacked political will for further talks with the U.S. On the contrary, we have repeatedly faced our counterparts' unwillingness to hold these talks. I have no doubt that there will be no deficit of political will for further talks as well. But one thing must be understood, the process cannot carry on for the sake of process on critical issues. There must be a concrete result, a concrete response. He noted that the U.S. may provide some concrete written language on both rounds of talks in the upcoming days. So as you can see, folks, they're obviously not happy with the way these talks are going. they're completely ignoring what Russia wants, which is no new NATO expansion, which isn't a surprise because NATO sees itself as this autonomous entity that they can admit whoever they like, whenever they like, and they don't need the consent of another non-NATO country to make that occur. Here's just another indicator as to how these talks went. Russia readies to deploy missiles in Cuba and Venezuela. So they're actually entertaining with other communist countries to get missiles on the border of the United States, essentially, if they put them in Cuba. For sure, this is basically looking like the Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0. So obviously, both sides are very tense now, folks. If the United States is deploying a nuclear submarine and Russia is basically getting ready to deploy missiles off the coast of the United States, I think that's Russia's way of giving the United States a taste of its own medicine, because obviously there are many, many missiles on the European border that are aimed at Russia. And that is essentially why they have the stance that they do, that they don't want any Eastern NATO expansion. So this is effectually Russia's way of giving the United States, and I guess to a degree NATO, a taste of their own medicine to see how they like it. As I said previously, if it is in the cards for Vladimir Putin to actually launch a ground offensive towards Ukraine, he is essentially waiting for more favorable terrain, meaning he's waiting for the ground to become completely frozen in the Ukraine so he can start rolling over the border. If that isn't a part of his game and all that military is simply a decoy to basically make the West look elsewhere as to what's really coming, which may potentially be missiles on the capital of Kiev for all we know, I don't know, but time will certainly tell. The next move is clearly Vladimir Putin's. I will say this, folks, one thing that Vladimir Putin can't do is nothing. Because if he does absolutely nothing about this, he is going to look very weak to his own people, and he's going to look very weak on the world stage, and he's simply not going to have that. He is going to make a move. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I really, really don't think that he is going to do nothing. That's just my opinion, but I certainly welcome yours. What is Vladimir Putin's next move? Please let me know in the comments below. But thank you so much, folks, for coming along with me to this update. Please remember to like, to comment, to share, and of course, to subscribe. Until the next update, God bless.